In this lesson, I'll share with you some of my influences. I'll share with you some of my heroes that I like to call my Design League of Justice. I'll start with Herb Lubalin. Herb Lubalin, an American designer, his work is also considered one of our majestic pieces in design. He was one of the madmen in the 60s in advertising and design, but his work is still relevant by the way he used typography into images. This is a design element that it always gets me blown away. The way that he treated typography with some just small adjustments and how he treated spacing and doing that spacing into an image is just a miracle. Louise Feely, who is one of our design legends here in New York and worldwide. Her work and research I have kept so close to mine. The idea of bringing heritage and practice is something that I have borrowed from her, and until now is one of my fundamental and principal design influences. Her work is both modern and nostalgic in a way that you can tell that has been placed in the now, but highly inspired by the past. In my work, I have used it as reference as well. How we bring nostalgia into the present and modernize it to keep it longer and give more longevity to those designs. You could find some of her work in the typographic research and different styles in type. I have used those books so many times because I think there's a nice reference of the mundane on the street influence to what we can do as designers with those references. Alexander Girard, who I admire so much because he only not just designed one thing, but he designed from a spoon to the end point of a restaurant. Lance Wyman, who is an industrial designer who is responsible for one of the most iconic branding systems in the Olympic Games, Mexico '68. And Jose Guadalupe Posada, who in my personal point of view is the first Mexican graphic designer. You can recognize him by his iconic drawing of La Catrina, who is for the Day of the Dead, the big skeleton with a big hat, and who was a cartoonist back in the day of the 20s in Mexico, but then evolved into a publisher with his drawings and his wit in the grading between politics and religion. Sign painting, this is not a person itself, but the discipline and the practice is one of the things that have taught me the most of I know in typography. The way you approach something on paper, or in this case a wall, is completely different of the way that you'll do it on screen. This had taught me from spacing to color to composition, and is one of the disciplines that had taken me the longer to master. Handwriting, which similar to sign painting is in a person itself, but this is the first approach that we have with typography. I want you to think of it as its own typographic source for you, and is the most humble human aspect that we have in shape or form of typography. I personally don't have the most beautiful handwriting. It's actually very ugly. But in its ugliness, there's something interesting that makes me more authentic. I don't even think of the aesthetic. I want you to think of that too. Regardless of how aesthetic it looks like, it's your own, and that's your identity. And with that, I think the rest doesn't matter. The combination between the artist and the disciplines is what informs my practice as a designer. In the next lesson, we're going to talk about what we're going to do in this course.